Tova, we're starting chapter 3.
Oh, okay.
Chapter 3, what page are we on?
In the Hebrew, this is page 59, I believe. Let's see, 59.
Nope.
No.
Commentary of chapter 3.
Okay. It is well known from Hasidic teachings that the verse, and a tzaddik will live by his faith, v'tzadik b'emunato yichyeh, alludes to two types of faith. Okay. So this is a famous thing.
I think I did have you.
There's this verse that's from Chavakuk. Chavakuk was the prophet that Eliyahu Navi brought back to life. And thanks. So Chavakuk writes, he knows a lot about these things. We said once that Chavakuk includes the highest verse of the entire Tanakh as far as Kabbalah is concerned, which is where he mentions Chavyon Oza Atzmut, which is where the word Atzmus comes from. It's actually, I always think that it's a word that was invented by the philosophers, but actually this word already existed in the Tanakh. And it's Chavyon Oza Atzmut. The Chavyon is like the hidden place, like machboim, like to hide something, where the boldness of the etzem lies. So there he's talking about the highest part of our perception of Hashem. So in general, he has a lot to say about all these things that are very high. And one of the things that he discusses is the tzaddik, and he says that the tzaddik lives by his faith, and the tzaddik lives by his faith. So what does it mean he lives by his faith? You know that today everybody quotes this in Israeli culture. It's like very common to quote this pasuk and to misquote it. The way they misquote it is they keep saying Adam be'emunato yichyeh, and they're trying to say that to each his own. Every person has his own beliefs, and don't push your beliefs on somebody else, which in general we're very much for, because we said many times that the Yiddishkeit is not about forcing a certain dogma on somebody that he has to believe like this or believe like that. Rather, however you perceive Hashem, as long as it's within certain confines, like you don't say that Hashem is limited, then settle. So you perceive him this way, you perceive him that way. But they also mean it to say that I can believe anything I want, meaning there's no limits on it. In any case, we'll see that there's a certain tikkun to that idea that I'm the one who's supposed to set my beliefs. We'll see that later on. Now the way it's explained in Chassidus is Tzaddik be'emunato yichyeh is like you read the word be'emunato as bet emunot. That he has, it's also in the plural. So a tzaddik lives by two types of faith. Bet emunot. Even the word tzaddik itself, tzaddik is equal to 204, and emunah is equal to 102. So 2 times emunah, 2 times 102 equals tzaddik, is 204. So even the tzaddik himself is made up, or as we'll see, surrounded by 2 types of faith. Okay? So what are these 2 types of faith? To understand this whole construct that Chassidus is trying to glean from this pasuk, so the first thing that we'll start with is the word tselem. And tselem is we'll see why in a second why we choose this word, but it basically alludes to the structure of the soul. The word tselem, right? We know what tselem. Tselem means image. That man was created in God's image. B'tselem Elokim bara oto. So what does it mean to have God's image? So we say that to have God's image is to be constructed like the Sfirot, the form of Hashem. It's like everything that God creates, He creates through these 10 channels, through these 10 sfirot. And so, if I'm structured like God, like the way that God structures things, so I have to be built in the same way. So how am I built? So there's all kinds of explanations how the 10 sfirot work. But when it comes to the person himself, so the usual explanation is that 9 of them are integral powers, and 2 are transcendent powers. 9 are immanent, and 2 of them are transcendent. So we have really 11. Okay, so how do I have 9 that are integral? So if I start counting from Bina with Dat, so Bina, Dat, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Malchut, that's 9. And then the 2 transcendent powers are Chochmah and Keter. Okay? A Chochmah, usually we don't think of it as a transcendent power. We usually think that Chochmah is an immanent power. It's something that the person experiences in himself. But the whole Tanya is built around, again, there's many ways you can describe it. So the Tanya, he chooses the Keter to be Chochmah. He doesn't have Keter in it. He doesn't talk about Keter at all. For him, Keter is the Chochmah itself already. Certainly you don't, and above that he already calls it like it's the Atzmus of Hashem. Like it's already even further beyond. So you have the structure of 2 that are transcendent and 9 that are integral. When you translate this into the more simple picture that we have of the soul, so we say the soul is divided into 5 parts, 5 aspects: nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, yichida, anima, spirit, soul, the living one, the singular one, and they divide also into 2 and 3. So here, a lot of times, to make things simple, you divide one of the numbers by something. So instead of 2 and 9, so we take the square root of 9. So we have 3. It's like one way of thinking of it. When you want to make things simple for people, there's too many moving parts. So you try to simplify by dividing it somehow. The part that has too many moving parts, you first of all divide it into 3 categories, and then everything divides further. So we know that the nefesh, ruach, neshama, right, the anima, the spirit, and the soul, they correspond literally to the 3 triads of Sfirot. They really do divide that way. Meaning they really represent 9, these 3. Because it's the intellectual and the emotional and the habitual. And each one is 3 also. Okay, so it's really, it's a very close, there's, like always, when you move from one model to the other, here we're talking about model of Sfirot, and then we're talking about the model of the soul, there's a little bit of shift that happens. So stuff shifts a little. But in general, the structure remains. Okay, so this is a little technical. Why are we getting to this? Because the 3, nefesh, ruach, neshama, they're integrated into the person's body. Meaning that we have a sense of them all the time. Like, for instance, Descartes, he thinks, what does it mean to exist? So I think, but you could also say I feel. And you can also say I habituate, I guess. I have a place where I live. I have some kind of habits, some kind of something that also gives me my sense of existence, just as much as my feelings and as my intellect. Of course, he was trying to solve a certain problem. Descartes was trying to solve the problem of skepticism.
Oh, Descartes.
And so he had this thing of maybe there's an evil demon who's fooling me. So what's one thing he can't fool me about? So he can't fool me about the fact that I am thinking. But I would argue it's just the same if you would say I am feeling or I am living somewhere. That these things he can't fool you about. Because they're experiences of self. So it doesn't really matter if it's the intellect or the emotions or the habits. It all boils down basically to the same thing. I feel myself. I feel that I exist in some way. Okay. The reason we use tselem, though, so we didn't finish. So these 3, nefesh, ruach, neshama, they're integrated into the body. And we say that the nefesh, the anima, in Chazal's ancient picture, it corresponded to the liver. And the ruach, the spirit, corresponded to the heart and the lungs. and the intellect, the neshama, corresponded to the mind. That was the traditional picture of it. I don't know how much has changed. In many ways, it could be this. We'd say exactly the same. But there are two transcendent forces, or two transcendent aspects of the soul. They're called chaya yechida. And by transcendent, we mean that we don't have a direct experience of them. So we know all this from when we learned the anatomy of the soul and so on. How is this captured in the word tzelem? So tzelem is tzadik lamed mem. So the tzadik is 9 times 10. So explain that these 9 times 10, they correspond to the 9 integral forces from Bina and down. Or there would be like Nefesh Ruach Neshama, 3 times 3 times 10. Okay? The Lamed and Mem, just to show you how complex it is, they together they refer to just one thing, as it were, okay? To the Keter, just to the Keter, with Chokhmah, of course, but just to what's beyond, the transcendent. And so the Lamed refers to the 3 lower forces of the Keter, or with Chokhmah, and the Mem refers to the higher side of the Keter. So if we say it in the language of Kabbalah, I'm sorry, this is like very technical. I hope you remember this from when we learned the anatomy of the soul. So Lamed and Mem here, they correspond to Arich and Atik, to the 2 partsufim of the Keter. Okay, this is the usual picture of Kabbalah. Now that I think
is the what?
the Lamed is the lower Partzuf, the Arich, and the Mem is the higher Partzuf, the Atik. And again, it's just to impress upon us that Tzaddik was all the 90. Tzaddik is equal to 90 was all the integrated, the experienced forces that we have in our soul. And then 70, 30, and 40 are like what we don't experience. We can't experience directly.
Are you implying that Chaya and Yechida is Chachma and Keter?
So it's either Chokhmah and Keter sometimes, or it's just within Keter. We call it Arich and Atik.
Let's say we did Nefesh Ruach Neshama, Chabad Chagas Nahin,
Right.
and then Chaya Yechida is
So when you
Keter.
said Chabad, you already included Chokhmah in it.
Oh,
So
sorry,
then you
I
would say,
didn't
no, it's
include
okay.
it. Okay.
So then the Lamed Mem would just be the Keter. It's fine.
No, but how would you separate Chaya and Yechida? Or you just
Either
bring
they're
them
the 2
together?
parts of the Keter,
Okay.
or they're Chokhmah and the Keter. It doesn't really matter. So it's all very...
All relative.
It's all relative anyway. So in certain situations, I would say it like this. But the structure has to remain. The main thing is the structure. It's 2 and 9. That's the main structure. Okay. What this all means is that when you learn Kabbalah, if I hope that someday all of you will learn. There's actually now a shir in English that Rabbi Morgenstern is giving on Orthodox Chaim. If I'm not mistaken, yes, it's what I saw. He's one of the big teachers today of Pnimius.
Wait,
And,
the Breslov?
Yeah,
Wow.
Morgenstern. Breslov is in terms of his, he has to hold on to something because
Okay, fine, yeah.
where he's in the world, he has to have some kind of something that he holds on to, otherwise he'll fly off completely. Somebody once told me that you think that people that are spiritual, so they're like kites, so they have a string attached to somewhere below. But then you understand there's also people whose kite, their string isn't attached below; it's detached somewhere above. And they're sort of like floating here a little. So he's a little like that. But he's one of the big experts today. He's one of the big experts today in Kabbalah. Morgenstern.
What's his first
His first language is Yiddish, I think. But he's English, so he speaks English very well.
Yeah.
Most of his classes are in Yiddish. A little bit of his classes he teaches in Hebrew.
Javi, you want to go to Yiddish?
And
He doesn't teach women. He doesn't speak to women.
no, but now he started teaching Otros Chaim, which is the
to women.
no, it's
Oh,
recorded.
okay. Oh,
It's recorded. You can get the recording. I think people have been putting them up on, or started just putting up on Facebook, and you can find them. And he's one of the big teachers today of Pnimius. he had I remember he had like a 3-month period that he came to every single shir from Rav Yitzchak. And then I
Wow.
guess he was filled. And then he went back home. That was it.
His pipe got filled.
Okay. His,
How many years was he by?
no, 3 months.
3
Remember, there was
months,
a
wow.
3-month period around Hanukkah. Hanukkah was this big
Wow.
holiday. Anyway, so why did I mention him? Because he said that if you ever learn Otros Chaim or you learn Eitz Chaim, either one of them, you'll see that the Arizal dedicates a huge chunk of his discussion to the Keter, to the intricacies of how everything in the Keter works. And you could say that the Baal Shem Tov, as we'll see today, he was very sensitive to this. And he learned from, you could say, whoa, is that new? That's got to be new.
I was looking for him.
I think of it as a nose, like it was very visual.
Ah, Mazal Tov. Just Mazal Tov to, this is
Sharia.
Sharia.
Sharia Chaim.
What number is this for them?
His first.
Oh, this is birth.
This is her
It's a boy.
son.
Oh, he's
This is her son with the
Chaim Chaim didn't bring some
are not
mashkin.
Whiskey?
What did we do? It seems to me that we skipped over
Not
it. Even
now.
confidence appears in the narrative.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a moment.
And, oh, you will.
Yeah, I'll come back to it. It's the main thing. It's the main event. So
That's why I wanted
you
to
got to introduce the fighters here.
All right.
I missed the beginning. Where is this from? Where is this?
This is all from Emunah V'Bitachon, faith and confidence. Okay, so as we'll see, the Baal Shem Tov, his biggest sensitivity was to the Keter.
Was to what?
To the Keter, to the crown. And so much so was his sensitivity that when he had to describe who he was learning from, he asked him, who am I learning from? So he said that you're learning from Achia Shiloni, from the prophet who taught Eliyahu. And since Eliyahu brought Chavakuk to life, back to life, so you can assume that this is like the chain of transmission here. That Achia Shiloni gave to Eliyahu, gave to Chavakuk, this whole understanding of how the Keter works. In the psyche, in our lives, what this means, and that's we've said this many times, that the psychological point of Chassidus is to open up our superconsciousness and to make it available. Is to bring down those powers that are in the crown and can't be normally accessed. That's what Chassidus is about. What's the main power that you have there? So obviously the most important one is to recognize that Hashem is creating the world at every moment. To see Hashgacha, to be able to see that Hashem is running the world. That's the main power that we have up there. And you have to bring it down. Normally it's locked. We said it's called the concealed mind, which really is the sealed mind. It's sealed. Avram, before he was called Avraham, he was called the concealed mind. Sechel ne'elam mikol rayon. It's unpalpable. Nobody in the world could access that part of the psyche. It was superconscious and it was beyond all comprehension. That's what it means. Sechel ne'elam mikol rayon. It's beyond all comprehension. And so you want to bring it down. So Achia Shiloni taught.
It was nobody before Abraham had it. That mean Adam didn't
Again,
have it.
before Avraham, as much as they knew, maybe even at some level, that Hashem existed, they couldn't experience Hashem. They had no experience of Hashem. Why? So this we just learned in today's morning class, that the reason was because Avram began with acts of loving kindness. That in order to draw all this down, you have to have acts of fixing your character, actions that correct and rectify your character. If you don't have loving kindness, chesed, which is the first faculty of the character, of the emotions, and you don't rectify it, then Hashem can't reveal himself to you. That he can't come down to you. So that's why Avram began to bring that down. Okay?
Was it a painful experience that they couldn't access it, or they just had no knowledge of it? Was it like you're aware of something
They,
you're stuck?
they knew that there was such a thing, but they couldn't experience it
It's
in
like a
any
feeling
way.
of I can't access something
Yeah,
that I have.
It's angst. It's probably angst. For the few tzaddikim that knew about this, it was like a feeling of angst. Caused them to be anxiety. So much so that in the end, Chanoch just disappears because he can't stand the separation from that place.
If Adam would've
So it's
just
either this comes down
apologized.
or I go up. What?
If Adam would have just apologized to Hashem, that would have been a rectification.
Right? Maybe. But it's interesting what you're saying, that the moment it was like either I'll know myself or I'll know you. The moment he ate from the tree of knowledge, it's about I'll know myself. And so if I know myself, I can't know you.
Then like
And
Chaim
about
did
and
tshuva.
then that's why I said I'm not sure this is just tshuva by itself. But in any case, when Avram came along, so now it became to know Hashem. And it took all the time until the Baal Shem Tov, until there was somebody who could both know Hashem and know himself at the same time. To do both, have both Keter and Dat at the same time, that's the big chiddush of what the Baal Shem Tov was able to do. In any case, so getting back to this, so the tzaddik here, in Tselem, in the word image, he has two faiths, meaning two things above him, the Lamed and the Mem. So look at the word Tselem. It's here, it's written here. Right? So the tzaddik, I hope I wrote it
Line
somewhere.
166.
Yeah. 166 or 63? Okay, I got 66 also. So you see in the Talmud, it starts with the tzaddik. That's like saying the tzaddik has two types of faith. What are the two types of faith? The lamed and the mem. So that's tzaddik be'emunato yichyeh, tzaddik bet emunot yichyeh. So the tzaddik lives two levels that are above him. So who's the tzaddik? The tzaddik is the integrated parts of the soul. So the integrated parts of the soul, they have two faiths, types of faith above them. Two surrounding, two makifim of light. Two aspects of the soul that are transcendent, that they're not normally accessible. Okay? So what do we get from this? That from the fact that there are two of them, begins to come down the bitachon, confidence. These are two types of faith that will give birth, as it were, or come down as two types of confidence. But you have to have the faith in order to get the confidence. Why? Because confidence, bitachon, starts with a bit. So it's like a beautiful illusion that there's two of these, two emunot, two aleph, and they bring down two bit. Where do we see this? Last time we talked about the fact that the bet had to come before the aleph, because otherwise, when Hashem created the world, in the creation of the world, the bet has to come before the aleph. Because if the bet wouldn't come before the aleph, what would happen? That we would feel that all things are equal, everything's equivocal. And it doesn't matter whether it's good or bad, all is the same. So there had to be a bet first. And this bet, we said, came from the higher aleph, which says that Hashem wants dafka, the goodness, and not the negativity. Remember that was last class, and the class before that. Where do we see that the bet is, there's two bets and two aleph in the beginning of the Torah? Right away, in the beginning, the first four words. First four words, what are the initials? What are the initials of first four words?
Bet. Aleph.
Okay. You see that's how the Torah starts. Bet aleph aleph. Bereshit bara Elokim et. So that's like saying that these two bets, and we said that in creation the bet has to come first, but really it's coming in virtue of the alephs. Okay? So all this is just technical to begin to get into this, like, because you have to have some kind of technical analysis, and then you begin to introduce the meaning behind it. Okay? The meaning is already, for the meaning you have to know all of Torah. Okay? But this is easy. This is just technical. It's just here. Okay, so now let's read it. With the number 2, I'll read again from 158. It's well known from Hasidic teachings that and a tzaddik will live by his faith, v'tzadik b'emunato yichyeh, alludes to two types of faith, bet emunot, where the number 2 itself alludes to the initial letter of confidence, bitachon beit, whose value is 2, and the manner in which confidence appears in merit of the power of faith. So there's 2 confidences that will appear in the merit of the 2 olives. So we already know about 2 confidences, right? What did we learn? We said that there's passive confidence and active confidence. But here we won't be talking about passive and active, even though we'll see that in the end they're exactly the same. We'll be talking about something a little bit different, okay? Because we'll be talking about 2 types of faith that are a little bit different. Before we talked about faith in Hashem. Now we're going to be talking about faith in the psyche. It's like something else.
Wow.
It's not faith in something. It's faith as a faculty, as a power in ourselves. Okay? So these 2 types of faith correspond to the 2 letters, Lamed and Mem, of the word God's image, Tselem, referring to the 2 surrounding aspects of the soul, the living one and the singular one, the Chaya Yichida, that surround and transcend the 3 integrated aspects of the soul. By the way, in this week's Parsha, the first pasuk has a tremendous allusion to Chaya and Yichida. The first pasuk is Vayidaber Moshe el Rashi Amatot Leimor, Ze hadavar asher tziva Hashem. Moshe spoke to the heads of the tribe, saying, "This is what God said. This is what God commanded." So, on this, it says this 8 times in this phrase, "Ze hadavar." This is what God commanded. It says this 8 times in the Chumash. This is the second to last time. Actually, this is the last time. It's the last time that it says this phrase. And Chazal say, the sages say about this phrase, that this is the special, unique prophecy of Moses. How? Because all the prophets would prophesy saying, Ko amar Hashem, so said Hashem, which is about. It's be'erech. It's not exact. Because all the prophets see through an unclear pane of glass. It's not transparent. It's translucent. But Moshe Rabbeinu, he sees through a transparent pane of glass, so he can say, this is what God said. Except that this is the 8th time, and only here, do the sages say in the Sifrei that this is Moshe's special prophecy, even though he already said this 7 times before. They never mentioned this before. Rashi, same thing. He follows the Sifrei, and this is the first time he says this. We saw it 8 times or 7 times already. Only in the 8th and last time is it said. So one might say because it's the last time. So now you have to tell me. The Baal Shem Tov had a whole teaching about why Dafka it's related to the vows of women. Why you get it specifically from the vows of women, that this was Moshe Rabbeinu's special prophecy. But we'll leave that aside right now. But this phrase, Zeh hadavar asher tziva Hashem, is equal to 851, which is Chaya times Ichida. And it's 23 times 37. Zeh hadavar asher tziva Hashem.
Equals how much?
851.
Which is?
And that's Chaya times Ichida. It's the singular one times the living one. It's like the two, again, they're like surrounding lights hitting each other. To hit in Hebrew, le'akot, is to multiply. That's what it's called. Le'akot is how it is in the Gemara. To hit 2 numbers, one with the other, is to multiply them. So 23 times 37 is Zadavar Shel Tziva Hashem. So there's a beautiful allusion to it in this week's Parsha. We're now learning about this. So it's a good week to start learning about these things. So again, this is the 2 faculties of faith in the psyche, in the Jewish psyche. It's not 2 types of faith in the sense of it's not just what I have faith in, because then you could say maybe the Rambam's right, there's
Are you saying
13.
that the Ko Amar Hashem is one type, and the Zeh Hadavar
Asher Tziva Hashem
that's another type?
is another type of prophecy.
One is
No,
more
Moshe
direct?
Rabbeinu has both of them. The 2, he's from above. The other prophets, they come from lower down.
Prophecy and faith you're putting them
No,
in the
but
same-
because Moshe Rabbeinu had these 2 levels of, for him the crown was active, so that's why he could get to this type of prophecy. Okay. So now, what are these 2 types of faith? There is another well-known Hasidic teaching, skipping to 167 because we did the rest, that the faith they have in the tzaddik allows the tzaddik to enliven all those connected to him. This teaching is based on the replacement of the reading of the word will live, yichayeh, with the alternate possible reading, will give life, yichayeh. So this is a famous thing, that in Chassidus they used to read this, that the tzaddik, he doesn't just live by his two types of faith, but he gives life through his faith. He gives life to others. That's why he has faith. We'll see more about this in a moment, okay?
So when you connect to the tzaddik, you basically connect to your Chaya Yechidah.
Right. He awakens your Chaya Yechidah.
Wow.
That's the main reason to have a tzaddik. It's like having a, if you're you have to have a role model. But what does a role model do? So if a role model is just to put a picture up on the wall, so that's very nice, but it's not very useful. The real use of a role model is that this is somebody that I'd like to be like. So I can't be exactly like him, but even just putting him as my tzaddik, he's my role model. That awakens in me things that are like him. In the same way that the Rebbe wanted everybody to be a Rebbe. So, all this was just the technical introduction. Now, line 171. Just as faith in God alone is the power that purges all machinations and negative thoughts from one's mind, by virtue of the Torah's injunction, you shall place no other gods upon me, so faith in the salient point of the tzaddik within every Jew, man or woman, and all the more so, faith in the Jewish people as a whole, has the power to separate the Jewish people from the nations. The special status given to the Jewish people is described in the verse, for it is a nation that will dwell alone, will not consider the other nations. So what's he saying here? That one form of the faith that I have, these two faiths, two types of faith that I have, faculties, is to have faith in a tzaddik. The other one is to have faith in a Jew. That's how the Baal Shem Tov
Faith in
explains
what?
this. In another Jew.
Okay.
What was the other one?
And
So
tzaddik.
to have faith in the tzaddik and to have faith in another Jew. That's how the Baal Shem Tov explained this.
That was according to Sarah
Good. Maybe because she very much believed in Yitzchak. So she had that ability. We're going to leave this apart for a moment, this last statement about how it separates us out. But we'll see in a moment why, because we'll come back to it later when we learn it about ourselves. We'll see what it means. What does it mean to stand alone? Standing alone is not an in-your-face quality. If it turns into that, you miss the whole point. Meaning, if to stand alone means that it's an oppositional stance, so you've missed the whole point of what it means to stand alone. Standing alone is not for you to be solitary and alone and sorrow, full of sorrow and indignation and all those things. That's not what it's meant for. The reason that Hashem wants us to stand alone is for the same reason that He stands alone, that He's alone, that He's one. And we'll see what oneness gives you. Oneness gives you a certain quality, which is the whole purpose of life. We'll say it right away, it means to be independent.
And that's probably why we're supposed to, as one people, stand alone.
Can. Because it means you can't be independent. You can't come to an independence of thought, free thought, to be a free thinker. You can't come to an independence of spirit. Sort of like, if you want, I grew up in America, sorry for all those who grew up in other places. Really, I'm sorry for you. The American spirit was exactly this in the physical. Which is like,
Economic independence.
right. It's like the Boston Tea Party, which is heralded as like call it the line that separated the colonies from becoming the states, was the moment that they said, we're going to be independent. And to be independent, we can't have somebody else's crown over us. We have to have our own crown over us. And our crown means none of what you think means crown. That's like what they said to Europe. What you think means crown, that for us doesn't mean anything. So you can get that spirit also, sort of like that's what Trump means when he says make America great again. He sort of means, I want to go back to that independence, that we're not reliant on anybody else. Everybody's, I'm not, and it's not oppositional. People understand like it's oppositional today. It's not necessarily oppositional. It's self-sufficiency.
Isn't it written on the dollar? In God
Okay?
we trust.
And God we trust. And it comes out of that. That's what it's trying to say. Except that in the United States, it's all been taken, or mostly been taken for the animal soul. It's not that there's no intellectual soul. There's a lot of intellectual soul also.
What's
see
the
that the-
pyramid
that
with the
the-
eye?
It's probably the same idea. That's the real crown. Like it's the 9 and then the 1 on top. See, there's 13 levels to it from what I remember, the pyramid. So they took a lot of Kabbalistic ideas, and the 13th
Mason?
level is the one. They say it's Freemasons, but these are symbols that were adopted from Kabbalah a long time ago. So it doesn't really, you don't need to read into it. But the idea is really that by being self-reliant, by not depending on anybody else, that's what it means. Am levadad yishkonu v'goyim lo yitchashav. The nation that dwells alone and doesn't take into consideration any other nations. Not because it doesn't care what they say, but because I'll make up my own mind. I can hear you or not. Doesn't really matter. And I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying in order to live my life, I have to be free enough to think by myself. I have to be a free thinker.
It's also like a practical thing. Like
Okay.
if the Jewish people really became like that, they really wouldn't need anybody.
Okay.
But then
But
if
we need this not in terms of the physical. We'll explain this in a moment. But we need it more in terms of the spirit. That our faith has to be clean of everything else. I don't want to hear what you Christians have to say about this pasuk in Isaiah. I don't mind you learning it, and I might even come to you to teach it to you. But I'm not interested in what you have to say because it only bothers me. It's noise in my ears. I need to hear what we say about it. That for me, that's. And the amazing thing is, where does this come from? It comes from the source of this faculty of self-reliance and being independent comes from having faith in another Jew. And that's the segula here that nobody would hit upon if the Baal Shem Tov wouldn't teach this. Like that's the amazing thing. That he comes and says, if you want to be independent, you have to first of all believe in everybody and all your brothers and sisters. You have to believe in them like you believe in Hashem. We have to understand what that means. What? And that also means that I'll believe in myself, meaning that if I can believe in others, I can believe in myself. This we'll see in a second, okay? But there's a very deep teaching here of this. You could say that this is what the Baal Shem Tov spent 10 years learning with Achia Shiloni. He learned with him every pasuk in the Torah in terms of these two faculties of faith. What do they mean? Achia Shiloni. He was the prophet who was the one who taught Eliyahu Navi, who taught Chavakuk, whose verse we're learning now, that Tzaddik Be'emunato Yichyeh.
If each person becomes a king, like it's just like the idea, each person becomes royalty, they can make their own decisions, or whatever, so to speak. What does unity and connection look like at that point? Because everyone is a free thinker for himself, because he's connected.
Because there's also a cloud. There's also something
What does
unifying
it look
everybody.
like? What would that look
So
like?
for that, you need a king.
What?
For that, you need a king.
You're saying there's a king above all the
Okay.
kings.
Som tasim alech hamelech. That when you come to the ultimate state of independence, freedom
Then
in
what
yourself,
is
then you're ready to appoint a king. Because then you see that, then you'll take the right king. The right king is somebody who fights for your freedom, who really fights for your freedom, even with things that I don't like. Nobody likes them. But if my animal soul has overtaken me in some way, he'll fight against it. I won't enjoy that very much. Because here's somebody, who are you to tell me what to do? But he says, I see you appointed me to take care of you. And I see that you've fallen as a victim, as as a prisoner of your own animal soul, and I want to free you from it because I want you to be able to be free. So people don't like that. They don't want to be free. So you can't really appoint a king. You can't really appoint a king. What's his name? Erich Fromm wrote a very important book called Fleeing from Freedom. He was one of the most important psychologists of the 40s and 50s and 60s. Erich Fromm.
Right?
No, he had his own thing. He built everything on the first 2 years of life, and how a person his relationship with his mother, especially during suckling. He wrote The Art of Loving and other things. He was also divorced. It was really interesting that he wrote The Art of
That's how we
Loving.
learned the art of loving.
I don't know if he wrote it before or after. If it's after, it settles all kinds of. I came to many conclusions about what I did wrong, but if it's before, you gotta wonder. In any case, so people don't want to be free. People want to be left alone. That's what they call freedom. Leave me alone. It's much harder to really be free. It's much harder to actually have somebody intercede on your behalf with your animal soul and try to free you from its negative impact. But in the end, that's what the king's role is. So it doesn't have to be that he actually gets involved in your life. It could be like we say here, that he frees you by being a symbol. And what is he a symbol for? He's a symbol for an awake state of these two powers of faith, of these two makifim, of the chaya and yichida. And then you see by him chaya yichida, two makifim,
In English,
the living one and the singular one, two transcendent parts of the soul. Let's read a little bit more, and then we'll come in. I'm going to skip this this paragraph and come to the next one. Particular potency, line 185, is to be had from each individual's belief in the salient point of a tzaddik that exists in him or herself. This is different from having self-confidence, as will be explained. To believe in myself is not the same as having self-confidence, because we now know that belief and confidence are two completely different things. What does it mean to believe in myself? This faith is particularly potent in purging from oneself any craving or coveting of that which belongs to another individual.
Wow.
Following the verse, he who hates gifts lives, which is similar to the verse, it's almost analogous to it, and a tzaddik will live by his faith. So it's so it's like to have faith in the tzaddik in me. To have faith in the tzaddik in me, in the same way that having faith in the tzaddik himself, that is able to awaken in me many things that are related to these powers of faith. That to have faith in the tzaddik in myself is like the purging that we discussed in the beginning of all the negative thoughts. What are negative thoughts when it comes to the self? Anything that doesn't belong to me. Not, like the Baal Shem Tov taught, not to copy anybody. Don't copy. If you do copy, you have to figure out how it works for you. You can't just go and mimic what somebody else did. That's one of his first teachings.
That's how chinuch starts.
What?
We grow up copying. That's what
Good,
chinuch is.
good, in the beginning, because you're only learning skills. You're learning how to speak, you're learning this, you're learning that. But the sign of maturity is that I stop copying. Especially, this is one of people are coming to this now. They begin to understand this. You don't need to copy. Like, what was so troubling about China, about Hong Kong, about all the far eastern countries in the 70s, 80s, 90s. In China, it's still the same way, but in Japan, I don't know if you remember this, but in the 70s, what was Japan? Japan was copy from the United States, just make it cheaper and smaller. That's what it was about. And then Japan stopped, and they began to make their own things. They began to develop themselves. So it's almost like they were childish and then they matured. So who took over? Hong Kong took over in Taiwan. So they started copying everything. So I remember when my father was in 1982, something like that. No, even 81. He had to go to Hong Kong in business. He came back with a clone of an Apple II. Right? So in America, an Apple II cost $2,000, $2,500, something like that. And in Hong Kong, you got it for $300. It was exactly the same thing. There's no difference. They just copied it.
Yeah, but then you couldn't get it in 19.
Who needed it? Back then, there was no.
But then it just-
Even today, there's no. Everything was so simple.
Go to Chinatown.
Same thing.
It's like it-
That's all it is.
It's all.
And everything is copying. So what is copying? Is a sign of immaturity. It's like you don't have a life. So to purge from the self what doesn't belong is to be independent, to be self-reliant. It's that I have my own thing. This is what Chazal say, that a person prefers one measure of his own than two measures that belong to somebody else. And what do they mean? He stole it from somebody else? No, they mean to copy something and to get two measures for it is not as good as doing something original and getting only one measure for it. So if I can make $100 on something original and 200 on something that's not, what they're saying is the person prefers, not in the sense that you won't find people that will prefer the 200 to the 100. Of course you'll find, but we're talking about maturity. So prefer means what's better for you. It's better for you to make a living from something that's original and only yours, and for it to be much less of a living than to go and just copy what somebody else is doing and make twice as much. Maybe the reason they give twice as much is because maybe if it's 3 times as much, people don't care anymore. I don't know.
When you say yours, you're obviously referring to that my
To your super consciousness.
colors is from God. It's not
Your
mine.
super consciousness. Yeah.
It's the infinite.
Okay, that's what it
Hashem.
is. That I have my own role in the world. And amazingly, the Baal Shem Tov taught us from who? From Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. That the Gemara says, Rabim nirsu la'asot kerashbi v'lo alta biyadam. That many tried to do like Rashbi, and they weren't successful. So says the Baal Shem Tov, it's not just that they weren't successful, they lost what they could have had. What do you mean they lost what they could have? They had their own original self that they lost when they tried to mimic somebody else. When you try to mimic, you lose yourself. So he says, this thing of having faith, it's not confidence yet. It's just having, what does it mean to have faith? It's to have faith, like you just said, that Hashem created me in His image. And Hashem is unique. That's what it means that there's a yichida. I'm a unique creation. There's nobody else like me. Well, unfortunately today that's become something very derogatory and because it's taken in the wrong way. Which is instead of creating self-reliance and independence, this has created a entitlement type of culture. So how do you say today in America to somebody who feels that they're special and unique, hey snowflake? You heard that?
It's terrible.
It's a snowflake. Why they use snowflake? Because just heat it a little bit and it melts. So all the snowflakes, you're right, they're all unique, they're all different. But it's not an example of something that's robust. To really be unique and special and with God's image means that you're independent. I don't need somebody else to legitimize my being. I don't need somebody else in order to feel good about myself. Where do I get this? Is everything that we learned in Rectifying the Ego. That the only legitimacy I have for existing is that God created me. That's it. Nothing in the world that I'll do will ever legitimize my being. Doesn't matter if I'm the biggest Talmid Chacham, the biggest tzaddik in the world. Doesn't matter. Because as far as Hashem is concerned, the reason that I'm here is because He decided that I'm here. And the moment He'll decide that I'm not here, then I'm not here. That's it. That's the legitimacy. I don't need to get it from anybody else. Again, it's not a confrontational attitude. I'm not saying in your face. I'm saying I don't need you in order to feel that I'm unique. And I don't need you to tell me how important my work is. And I don't need I don't need it. I don't base my well-being on somebody else giving me the respect I think I deserve.
It's not dependent on it.
Good. I'm independent of all this. And that's really what it means, Am levadad yishkonu v'goyim lo yitchashav. That if you really want to be a representative of God in the world, if you want to spread godliness in the world, then you have to epitomize that stance that says, I'm not dependent on anybody else. I don't need gifts either of respect, or physical, or emotional, or spiritual, or whatever it is. I can stand by myself. Why? Because I'm one with the infinite. That's all. And again, it's not because you're not. Because what does he say now? That to come to this, how do you come to this feeling that I'm self-reliant? So it's having faith in yourself, but even more importantly, is what the Baal Shem Tov taught, to have faith in every Jew. So it's not, so it even starts the other way around. It starts by my feeling that you're original, that you're the unique one. If I can believe that about you, I can also believe it about myself. What time is it? Is it?
Yeah, it's like 128.
Oh, okay. So this is beginning to fashion. So we have faith in the tzaddik and faith in another Jew. Instead in another Jew, which is like faith in myself.
What's the real reason that you have to really concentrate on the other Jew first?
Oh, this will come to. That's the secret that he. That's the secret that he learned from Achia Shiloni.
And we don't know it yet?
And no, we haven't
Do you know
discussed it yet.
Are you going to say, right, I knew that?
Getting there.
So again, what is the power of faith? The power of faith is first of all to know, is to purge what's not shayach, what's not relevant. So the same way that the faith in Hashem as creator of the universe purges my mind from all the negative thoughts and to believe that there's only goodness, there's only Hashem. So when it comes to the self, to the psyche, to the powers of the soul, faith does that are not relevant to me as a person. All those things, all the things that I covet in the end. So what does he say now? From this we come to understand the deep connection between the first commandment, I am Avaya your God, and the last commandment, you shall not covet. The cause for both is faith in God, and the effect is that one shall not come to covet. So in the same way that believing in only Hashem frees my mind from all the negative thoughts, so having faith also, when it comes down to the soul, it impacts me in the sense of freeing me from needing something from somebody else. Whatever is yours is yours. I don't need it. So getting rid of that's also why it's in the Ten Commandments. You also think, why is it so important not to covet something? Well, what if you covet? So what's the end of the world? It says, yeah, for you it's the end of the world.
Maybe we only covet things when we haven't maximized who we are meant to be. That's
Obviously.
why we covet
Obviously,
things. Right. So
because
it's
it's immature.
right. I'm saying we're not. In other words, in the end, we need to be doing that holy work. So it's not like I sort of see it as the coveting is just a signpost of like you're not yet in your Tzelem Elokim.
That's why
It's almost- it's
Ten
helpful.
Commandments.
It's helpful.
If you haven't come, if you don't know the secret of Shabbos, you don't know the secret of bringing things into being. If you don't know the secret of coveting, you don't know the secret of the self. Each one there is a whole world of the most important things a person needs to do. Again, I think it's like some kind of just rectified societies. It's not to covet, not to kill, not to steal. These are social rules. But more than being social rules, each one of them really, in the end, defines you. And it's what matures you, what makes you into a human being. So again, so we have these two types of faith. So the first one is the faith in the tzaddik, and the second one is the faith in myself, or the faith in the tzaddik in me. Okay? And this is the biggest chiddush that the Baal Shem Tov had. He said that every person has to have faith in himself. But to have faith in yourself, you have to have, first of all, faith in another Jew. And you have to, what does it mean to believe in another Jew? It's to believe that he's also unique.
Do you have to have first faith in someone? Can you just start with another Jew?
Oh, so this becomes very interesting. What comes first? Good. So in the Torah it says, "Vayaminu b'Hashem u'v'Moshe avdo." So first you believe in God, and then you believe in the tzaddik. Okay, so you first have to have faith in Hashem, then you have faith in the tzaddik. But then when you translate this into the psyche, so it's having faith in the tzaddik in somebody else, in the tzaddik, and then faith in myself. It's like to have faith in myself, I first have to see that there's Hashem out there. So I have to, if I can't really believe in other people, I can't believe in myself.
You need some.
So every person's like a tzaddik in this case. I don't need some particular tzaddik. It can be anybody.
Okay.
Okay?
Sometimes you need a very obvious example. Okay.
Nachon, I mean, that's the first type. The first type is the relationship is the same. That if I want to be able to believe that there's Hashem, we said this a few weeks ago, that the Baal Shem Tov said that you can't come to fear of God without first going through fear of a tzaddik. That's what he explained about Ba'apei Moshe Milta Zultatahi. In the Tanya it says something else. In the Baal Shem Tov he says that if you come to fear Moshe, then it'll be easy to fear God. It's like you need a step in the middle. He doesn't want you to stop with fearing Moshe Rabbeinu. He wants you to reach having fear of heaven. But he says to have fear of heaven is too much of a leap for a regular person. So you have to have an intermediate step in the middle in order to make another step afterwards to have fear of heaven. That's in terms of fear. In terms of faith, it's the other way around. And first I have to have faith in Hashem. Then if I have real faith in Hashem, I can have faith in other people. If I don't have faith in Hashem, I can't have faith in other people.
Is there another reason you don't have faith in other people, or is it only because you don't have faith in Hashem? I mean, it works one way, but does it work? Huh?
It could be that you're just when you're calling faith in other people is more like just
Unbelievable.
it's just not
But does that
rectified.
mean you don't believe in, have faith in God?
It's always
What, you don't see the
Well,
God
it might
in
be
him?
If you don't see,
I understand.
you don't want to say.
I don't know.
You don't
I'm
know?
trying to
Usually if you
think.
have issues with people, you have issues with God.
doesn't it always root
It's
back to
usually
them?
reflective.
It's like, well, remember, I don't know if you remember this. We
Right.
said this once that somebody comes into, client comes in, and the one thing he doesn't want to talk about is his father. So where's the problem? His father.
Where-
So
Right.
Same thing. Everybody who has issues with Hashem doesn't want to talk about them. To have faith in Hashem is to believe that Hashem is good. Like we said,
Yes.
he's all good.
And if you believe that, then why don't you believe others are good?
The question is whether you really believe that.
Then that, so you are saying if you don't have faith in
I think
people,
that it bears.
you really don't have faith in God.
It teaches you that you still have to have faith in Hashem. You have a ways to go there.
It's very hard for a human to go for that.
Where are we stopping and starting? Like I'm saying, if we know there's a deeper, right,
If we really
level,
know,
and
if we really know.
at least to have it in our conscience.
Okay. Anyway,
What about unfaithful people?
so
That's
again,
why it's hard.
that's whether you think again. To have faith doesn't mean that he is a free agent. To have faith is to believe that he has an image of God. Whether he uses it or not, he might not be free yet.
It's like what the Rebbe
But I
saw.
believe that he can. But the Rebbe tried to free it. That's what he said, that the king really tries to free it in each person. So let's just say, we said that these are two different, what kind of confidence? These are two types of faith, and they give birth to two types of confidence. So on the one hand, when I have faith in Hashem, what type of confidence do I get? That it's a confidence that, well, the only way to describe it is like we said, think good and it'll be good. It's like a passive confidence that it will turn out for the best. It's passive because I'm not doing anything.
Oh, okay.
I'm just believing.
It's not a work to
I'm
keep
just
it.
having. I'm just trusting that this will be the outcome. But faith in myself, that gives rise to self-confidence. That what does it mean, faith in myself? That Hashem has given me all that I need in order to create a positive outcome. That Hashem gives me the strength. I'm self-reliant. Why am I self-reliant? Because I have faith in Hashem. Faith in Hashem gives me the faith in myself. That I'm in His image. Again, to be in Hashem's image, that's what it means, is to be self-reliant, to be independent, to be a free thinker, and to not need to legitimize my existence in any other way except for the fact that Hashem created me. That's all.
I just figured it out. It's okay. It's easier to do that individually, and then as soon as your family steps in, you're screwed.
Why? Because they give you too much
I can see
legitimacy.
telling this to my family.
Because they give you too much legitimacy.
Because I let them
You
give me.
depend on
Right.
them
So
in
I'm
a
not
way
really-
that's
so
not.
that proves you're not.
Okay, so
Right.
so again, everybody makes this call it this compromise.
Right.
What does a father want? What,
Really?
okay, what does he really want? If he's smart, what does he want? He wants his,
smart.
his son to be independent. He wants him to be his own person. He doesn't want him to just copy him. If he's smart. If he's not, if he's a copier, so also maybe that's what he wants. He also wants his children to copy him.
Right.
So, a wise father, like, who's a story like this? It's a beautiful story. It's how Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer starts. It's the story of Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanus. That his father was a very wealthy landowner, and he was the biggest of all his brothers. And he used to plow in the mountains, where all in Israel there's no topsoil. You don't have to dig, and you're right in the bedrock. So he used to plow in the bedrock of the mountains because there's no soil above it. It was very hard, but it was very strong. And one day, I don't know, why did he come to this? He had a dream or what?
Who was this?
Eliezer ben Orkanus. He suddenly had a dream or something like that. I don't remember what happened. What?
Somebody came by.
He saw a child. He saw a young child, and he saw he doesn't know anything. And he was suddenly coveted. He coveted what that child knew. He said, I'm this big, brawny guy, and this kid knows more than I do. So he decided, he left it's like Elisha also that we read in the Haftarah. He left the plow in the field, and he went to Yerushalayim to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and started learning by him. And his father, who learned that he had left and went to Yerushalayim, so he said he disowned him completely. And he wrote him out of the will, and that's it. And one day, many years later, the father came to Yerushalayim for some reason. Obviously, he wasn't a big temple goer, so he didn't have any reason to go to Yerushalayim. So he came to Yerushalayim, and for whatever reason, he came into the Sanhedrin, or Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai found him somewhere, and he knew who he was, and he invited him over, whatever. So he came to this feast, and Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who's the Nasi of that generation, he says, and now we'll hear words of Torah from Eliezer. He didn't say who he is. And the father didn't recognize him at first, because it was many years, and then he heard him speak, and he said, wow, where did this come from? And so finally he says, this is your son. And he was so taken by it, because what did he see? He wasn't impressed by the Torah. Because if he would have been impressed by Torah before, he would have sent him a long time ago to learn. But he thought it was nonsense. I think that what he saw was here's a man who's standing in himself. He's a person that, like Rabbi. They're all listening to his Torah. It's something original. It's something that this is his understanding. And look at how the brightest minds in the world are listening to him. So he's come into his own. He says something, so he was so impressed by it that he said, I'm going to write off all the other brothers and give everything to you.
No, then it's a Joseph story.
What is it?
It's like Joseph and his brothers.
So,
Then they have to work on knocking.
okay, so
everybody
he dissuaded him from it, of course, and to give everybody an equal share and so on. But you see that the father, what he was really looking for was somebody that would be original. And when he saw that somebody was original, so then that's what he really. But that you have to be very rectified to know that.
And he probably had to leave home for that to happen.
He left home, but he wasn't there for years.
Wow.
Okay, so next week we'll begin to go deeper into the reasons for everything that we discussed today.
If someone's in that very rooted state, obviously like the tzaddik is the only person I can imagine, what do his prayers sound like? Because he's not even desperate with God. He just trusts that he has all that he needs, that all is well.
Maybe it's all gratitude.
So the
Is
Rebbe
prayer
calls
just
this
gratitude?
Tefillah Moshe, the prayer of a wealthy person. And by wealthy he means that he doesn't need anything. He doesn't need anything. So what is he connected to? So what kind of so where is the prayer?
He's just praying
So
through
that's
now.
what we'll talk about next time.
Well, very simply,
Yes.
this is the need to
Right?
So the reality that women and children are dependent. Children depend on their mothers, mothers depend on.
Yeah, but you know very well that you want them to be independent. You don't want them to stay dependent. You want them, that's what you're suffering from. That they're not dependent. That they're not independent.
Mothers who suffer.
Yeah.
Their children
Yeah.
are not independent.
All the more so when it goes into the grandchildren. You feel that. So eventually, you get so fed up, so you leave. That's what it is. That's what happens to a person. At a certain stage, I felt that about my father. That when my father passed away, it was like my mom was saying, look, I've tried everything I can to make you independent. Obviously it hasn't worked. So now you'll have to be independent. And it's a very difficult process for anybody who continues to rely on their parents for a long time. But eventually it happens to you. And I guess that's why the world works the way that it does. Because in the end, Hashem wants every person to be independent. Okay.
Thank you.